how we want to kick that off, I guess. Carlos Melgar from Gitcoin said the next round is likely going to be after ETH Denver. ETH Denver is said to be, I don't know, I don't remember the exact date. It's like mid to late February. So the next round is probably going to be in March, or somewhere around March. Um, my work has usually been like there's days where it gets pretty busy, but at this point it's pretty busy in a sense of um like I just have to repeat the same stuff every round. So it's not like busy hard, it's just you have to get things done in time, I guess. Um in and I'm like, I wouldn't want to commit because I don't know myself, but I don't see why I shouldn't be able to give a hand anyways. So yeah, not sure how to proceed.
I have one idea I'll throw out into the mix. If we're serious, this is one of the things I was trying to capture in that incubator doc that I shared. This was just a comment, but if we're really serious about not spending down the common pool for the grants rounds, then we need some kind of protocol or process that we follow that just keeps us very disciplined about not spending the common pool funds. And so there are probably lots of different ways of doing that, but one option would be to say, we're always seeking sponsorships for not the next round, but the round after that. Like we're constantly looking 2 rounds ahead for sponsorships. And if we, so let's say that what we're doing, with like this Octant, right? This Octant grant application is, we're not even using that for the March round, right? We would be using that for the April, May, June, July round. And what that does is it gives us plenty of time to know whether or not we can do a round, right? Without stressing ourselves out with like uncertainty and things like that. And so it'd be like, okay, by this round, let's say by the end of February, we make a go, no-go decision for the next round. And it depends on whether or not we got sponsorship. If we get sponsorship, then we go ahead. If we don't, then we say, okay, we're going to not do this next round. So I'll throw that out as a starting place to just think about.
Yeah, and just kind of like piggybacking on that point, I think it would probably be good to agree on this assumption of, I mean, I do believe that we should, of course, keep running the rounds, but that we shouldn't use any more common pool funds. I think that if we're able to maybe get consensus on that, I think that'd be a good first step as well. Personally, I think that everything should go through sponsors, and yeah, I agree with that idea. I think that'd be really interesting to be able to plan ahead and just try to depend more on how many sponsors we can get in order to plan out and run the following rounds. I think that probably should be the way to go.
I mean, I wouldn't want the TC to miss the next GG series, because like if we've made any effort is to always be there. Like we in fact we've been the only round that has always been um in this series since they opened, and on time and everything like that. So like on one hand I wouldn't want that to stop, you know. But I understand that between capacity and all that, it's also hard to like be on the next round and at the same time be looking for sponsors and all that. So that's a big question. But in and then in general about sponsors, I agree. One of the first things I said when we were first doing the program is to build it so that on the long run we don't have to put a cent, and maybe we even make some money on the way.
Uh, to that point, NT, I'm wondering, do you see like any benefit for us in kind of like not missing any GG round, like actually doing the following one? Is there like anything from Gitcoin that we'd probably be missing in terms of the relationship or in terms of any other possible benefit? I don't know.
Like not strictly. I just think that reputation is important, and I've always tried to, I don't know, pride myself and ourselves in always being able to deliver. But like it's not like if we miss one round we you know we are wrong or doing something bad. But I unless there's a really good reason, I would always try to make them happen.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there's also this interesting idea that we've all mentioned. Nate has mentioned before uh, of doing this solar experiment of trying to run around ourselves on a different time period without the GG rounds. Um, I don't know if that could be a possibility for the following round that we do. But I do think it'd be interesting. I'm also really curious to see how we do uh, on a different time frame, and how well we're able to generate donations and engagement all on ourselves, right? Maybe it takes more effort, but either way, I think we would probably learn a lot throughout the way, and maybe after doing a round that way, it will be clearer for us to say, oh no, yeah, we should always stick to the GG calendar, to the GG timeline. Or maybe we say, oh no, maybe we can do a combination of both throughout the year. And I mean, I think it would just be like a good experience for us to have. And, considering these two things that were also mentioned about funds and capacity, right? I think those are the two factors that kind of like make us question if we should do a round in March, because I think they are pretty important, right? Especially capacity, probably, right? I mean, we could try to rush and get some sponsors or do a smaller round or whatever. But in terms of capacity, I guess that'd be one of the questions to take care of. So considering that, I don't know, maybe it would be also a good possibility to skip this one, at least the GG one, and maybe plan out something else for, I don't know, April, May. Just throwing that as another
I think
possibility.
I think doing rounds outside of GG is actually counterproductive for many reasons. Like the first thing being again capacity. Like so, well, let me just come back. I think it's counterproductive because right now we are not in a position to experiment. Even though I would I would love and support that, but I don't think right now we can experiment a lot. And if we know that we will have less capacity, and if, for example, just the fact that our sponsors are going to be promoted by Gitcoin and yada 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 is are huge benefits. Um, I if we won't do the round in March, I probably wouldn't do any till the next GG round, till the TC overall is in a better place, and then experimentation can happen. What happens with doing rounds outside of Gitcoin is, for example, um, who's going to do the civil analysis? Are we going to get, or how are we going? We don't use them as often as we should, but they do give us every single round an updated marketing plan list I've taken inspiration from, and that we should use more often. For example, we've never gotten to coordinate community activities, but that's like on us. But the offer is also there. So like there's a series of benefits that Gitcoin provides. I do agree. I'm not exactly sure that the price, the 10% tax is the best one, but at the same time, I'm not sure how we would complete a round that meets all of our criteria, which is pretty much having the round complete, from setting it up, from managing it, to civil analysis and all that, to also getting every single cent from sponsors and all that if Gitcoin's not involved. And if we aren't sure about anything about something, we probably should just stick with something, which is one of the comments I also made on one document where we were also entertaining Giveth. It's like, I wish, but
You're cutting out there, Isaac, at the end.
now or not. Uh,
Is that are other people hearing NT at this point? Because all that last part was garbled.
No, it cut out for me too.
is it better now by
Yes.
any chance?
That's better, NT.
Yeah.
Cool. I was just saying about the comment I made on your document, Gideon, on Giveth and Gitcoin. It's like, I wish we could be entertaining multiple options, but we can't. So till there's more capacity both on human resources and economic resources, we should probably stick to one single plan. And we haven't really, how do you say it? Like, we haven't explored or done the current plan to its fullest. Like, we have barely asked one sponsor, which was Ocean. Our return was purely out of luck. We haven't used the Gitcoin's marketing force to its fullest, because we barely can coordinate ourselves. So that, like, there's some minor things we haven't explored yet, and if we aren't even done with one thing, I don't think it's smart to jump onto the other and doing rounds with Giveth or outside of Bitcoin's GG calendar.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points. I think it's worth also just kind of stepping back objectively and looking at Gitcoin and what's been the most valuable for us. Like, actually, if you look at how much money we've raised, aside from Arbitrum, it's not a lot. Like it's barely, the donations that have come in have barely covered the cost that we pay to Gitcoin. So as a actual tool for distributing and catalyzing new donations, it's questionable. But I think that what Gitcoin does and has done an incredible job of for us is raising awareness for the TEC and raising awareness for token engineering. I think that I've said this a couple times over the last couple weeks, but the fact that we got as many badge holders to back us on this retro grant, like I was really surprised that we got as many as we did. And I think that Giveth Galaxy may be part of the reason for that. And Tam and Griff, helping on the side. But they had to be very careful about it. I think that actually one of the main drivers is the awareness that the TEC has built over this last year by working with Gitcoin. Like the association that we have, the positive association that's come from working with Gitcoin as a round operator has been phenomenal. So I think that is like the primary thing, and it's actually worth paying for because it helps to build the long-term marketing. It's like a marketing muscle more than a grant-making muscle. And I hate to call it that because I think we all went into it thinking that it was really about distributing funds, but actually it's more of a marketing thing that builds the long-term capacity of the commons to actually raise money. So that's kind of my working assumption. And from that perspective, assuming you buy that argument, then I think it is always going to make sense. I mean, always. Let me not use words like always, but for the foreseeable future, it is going to make sense for us to continue to do Gitcoin grant rounds because of the awareness that comes from that and the engagement that comes from that. It's just like such a great mechanism for reaching lots of people beyond our circle. Now, having said that, I also think that there is probably a level of participation in that would be too much. Example, if we did it every month, I'm using an extreme, but if we did that every month, that would be too much. That would be too expensive, right? Not worth it. Every quarter, maybe that's the right tempo, but maybe even that is too much. Maybe just twice a year would be good. It would be good enough to do a really good job, really, pull out all the stops and just get a huge bang for it. And then leave us some space to do some experiments. And I'll stop by saying that I think the experiment that we really need to focus on this next year is the year of optimism for TEC. Like, that's so clear to me that's where we can raise some really significant money for the field and for the commons. And so figuring out, it might even be using Allo on a round that is partnering with, like doing a grant, not a retro grant, but a proactive grant to Optimism, and say, we want you to do two things. We want you to help us with, the sponsorship funds. We want you to basically have the matching pool. And then two, we want your help in, finding projects that could make use of TE. I think there's something really powerful there. And I guess the last thing, this really is the last thing, is, but I agree with you, Isaac, that doing that right now, we are not in a position to do something like that right now. So maybe what we do is we delay this next round. We do the round in June as a Gitcoin round, and then we look for the next round we take that off, and we do something with Optimism to like run a ecosystem, like an Optimism ecosystem round, and figure out what that means, and then go back to Gitcoin for the next round. So that's my proposition.
Sounds good. I'm still not convinced about the optimism round, but otherwise sounds good. And like in general, it's even smart because then there's like 6 months ish to look for sponsors for the remainder of the year. But I'm not sure doing a round between two Gitcoin rounds with Optimism is any smart. Also because Optimism is really like, I'm sure we can get some money, but it's also the governance there is very complex in a behemoth, and I don't know. Like it's very rigid. It's a very rigid structure. So it's not like we can propose anything. And that makes it a bit weird. So I guess we'll have to see, but I'm not sure. Like in any case, I would probably just get the money for a Gitcoin round that's paid with OP or something like that. But doing it in the middle is pretty much what we've been talking about. But and so I guess seems like we are in a general agreement of not doing the round in March.
Yeah, I would say I am. I like this cadence of doing the GG rounds 2 times a year, and having more time to prepare and get sponsors. And yeah, and throughout throughout the year, in the middle of these rounds, I think it's also a good opportunity to explore different options, whether that's this Optimism grant or maybe something else, right? But I think just having more time to figure that out will be beneficial.
Important to say, like, I think for this year is fine, but I don't think like if we are sticking with Gitcoin, we're sticking with Gitcoin. If not, we are not. I don't think making just being with them 2 times a year is worth it actually. But
what is that assumption based on, do you think?
I think there's a lot of expectations from people, especially grantees. So if you're part of a like, it's also not like do or die, of course. But if you are on a quarterly program, you are on a quarterly program. You know, it makes it communicating all that so much more complex. And I believe like we've done that for this whole year, so it shouldn't be that hard to run four rounds if based also under the assumption that the team is just getting better and more organized. So I don't see why would we just do 2 a year.
I think that the question that I'm starting to ask right now is, what's the purpose of Gitcoin rounds? And I think that we've heard this complaint from a number of people. I mean, like Jeff Emmett, who's like, and a couple others who've said, I'm not convinced that these QF rounds are the most cost-effective way of raising funds. I mean, they take a lot of energy to run. But what they are really good, like as I said earlier, I mean, they're really good for building awareness. I mean, there really are marketing campaigns. And I think the question then is, is that really good use? If we think of them more as marketing campaigns and less as like actually driving a lot of money, are there other things that we should be experimenting with? And that's what that incubator doc is looking at. It's like, if we really take this seriously and we really want to channel funds into the projects that are really going to move the field, it's not clear, even with tunable QF, that those rounds are the very best way of doing that. And so I think it's important for us to free up some space over this next year to look at some alternative ways of channeling funds. And I think we should definitely keep Gitcoin for the reasons, for marketing reasons, and for the fact that, I mean, it's a low cost way, what you're touching on, Isaac, I think is true, which is we kind of know how to do this now. And so it's actually relatively easy compared to other kinds of things that we could be doing to keep doing this. But I'm just saying maybe we ease up on how much we do it, and we, for the same resources, the resources are freed up, we start looking at some experiments of how else we might be doing this.
I don't know, because it's what I told Bear. It's the same. Like, we have barely raised 5K for a single QF round, and now we're thinking of doing less of them to start figuring out some other stuff. Like, I would stick to the initial plan, do for a year, even if this particular year we can't do for a year. Learn how to do the for a year good, and then revisit. And if by next year, when we really know how to run a round where we don't have to put even a cent, then I would start to experiment. But I don't see it as smart. Like, we've done a bunch of experimentation so far. The only one that has done something at least good is the QF rounds. And after barely 1 year, we are ready to move on to the next experiment when we are even ready with QF rounds. I'm not sure we are in the position with the budget and capacity to be doing that at this point.
What do you mean by the next experiment?
Like, so Gideon is talking about the incubation, which I think it's a really good idea. But if the incubation gets in the way of the QF round plan that we haven't even completed, I don't think that's smart.
I think one thing that would help
that's talking about incubation, but really, I was just going to say that I'm talking about incubation because you were talking about incubation, but any experiment that gets in the way of QF rounds before we really master QF rounds, I think it's not a smart move.
I think one thing that would help us to be more objective about this is some assessment of the impact, right? I mean, we know that there are some good projects that got funded as a result of our QF rounds. I mean, we think so anyways. But I think we all suspect that there's some random shit that's getting funded too, right? And some of it, at least in the early rounds, we have no idea what those guys are even doing with the funds, right? And whereas, like, I'm not saying we go back to conviction voting. That's not my point. But, you know, even just using conviction voting, which was another mechanism, we funded some cool shit. Like actually some stuff that really has ended up having some big impact, you know? So I guess, you know, my point is, I think we just need to be very careful about what the purpose is. And I think if we're very clear about like what it is that we're getting, what the field is getting from Gitcoin rounds, and just be very objective about it, that will help us to make some decisions about the future. And, you know, I guess the other thing to think about is like, we don't know what 2025 is going to bring us. And so trying to get too far ahead of saying like, we will only run 2 Gitcoin rounds a year, or we'll run 4, or, you know, we just don't know. I think we can make some decisions for this year and maybe do some experiments to just see if there's anything else that does work, assuming we get the resources, internal resources to do that. But I think, yeah, we probably shouldn't get too far ahead of ourselves in long-term plans like that.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is try not to do like how things like, because we need to complete stuff, and if we start taking over multiple things, we are not going to do none of them right. We don't even do QF rounds 100% right now, and that's the only thing we do pretty much. And like, I agree, I'm not the biggest fan of QF. And when we started thinking about a grants program, I presented a bunch of different mechanisms and ways. We ended up going with QF because of Gitcoin and blah blah blah. But if we are going to stick with Gitcoin, we stick with Gitcoin. If we are going to move to something else, we move to something else. But we have to, for once, try to really master something before we even think of moving on or spending a bunch of resources. Like, again, like we are not even sure we can make the March round because of money, because I want to be here, in multiple reasons. How are we even thinking of taking on multiple things for a year? If throughout the year we see like there's by any chance some capacity, if the team grows, whatever, then yes. But at the current state, we should just pick something and stick with it. Because it also depends on the whole team, like being 100% focused on the QF rounds to be able to raise enough money on every single round to not have to worry about the common pool, for example.
Oh, fuck. One of the other things that I've also felt throughout this year, because like you said, I think it was really good to have an initial plan. And I think we've actually been following it. I think we had 3 rounds this year. So we kind of like were able to get the flow and understand the process and all the different factors that took to run around. And I think that was a great experience. And as part of that experience, I think it's also important to take time to be able to reflect on that and adjust accordingly, adjust the plan if necessary. And I think that would be kind of like what would we be doing for this coming year, you know, like based on our experience, like you said, based on our capacity as well. I think we haven't been able to fully be able to run rounds at the best, at its best. Also, due to this lack of reflection, in my opinion, I felt a bit rushed doing these 3 rounds, as they happen pretty often, and you know, also this relates with the capacity of the team. That, like you said, we also don't know if and how when it's going to change in the upcoming year. So from one reason or the other, I think we've been lacking this time of reflection and time of actually, based on that experience, trying to rethink or figure out the actual purpose to what Gideon was saying, the purpose of running these QF rounds. Because if we don't have that clear, I think it's hard to say that we're getting or what type of benefit or impact we're getting from these rounds, right? So yeah, I just think more time to assess this, it would be helpful in all fronts.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying there, Bear, and with some points that were made earlier about well, this thread of just utilizing the expertise that we have built around the Gitcoin rounds. We are taking a loss with Isaac leaving the team, so it's a bit of a step backwards, but if we can just keep up ratcheting the process of executing the rounds, I mean, it's like we're in kindergarten, or it's like our first year of basketball practice. Like, we've only been doing this for 1 year. That's kind of like training wheels. And so, yeah, to move on to something else would be kind of a waste of that investment of practice running rounds, because this year ahead can be a lot smoother. And also on the topic of like running new experiments, I don't think that's the case with the incubator document as it's laid out, because it pretty much just builds on the grant round process. It's talking about how to tighten up the grant rounds, how to have, say, like a specific topic for a round, or have tighter qualification protocols, or have an TEC internal project apply for the round. It's like, it's all based around the base process, except some of the stuff at the end that's longer term, like using a bonding curve and thinking about boosting demand for TEC. But for the most part, this incubation process is all baked around the TEGR process. And I think that's what Gideon is saying, as seeing what is the purpose of this. Like, if quadratic funding with Gitcoin is more of a marketing play than a fundraising play, like, let's acknowledge that and then make the most of it. And then also, how can we curate really high quality projects and get them funded? So I think refining the qualification process, also refining using the TQF tool, because it's now very functional for tuning these parameters, where we can raise the voice of our community and have a lot of influence on what grants are actually receiving funding. So my vote would be, I don't know for sure if we're going to do this round in March, but I'd say let's almost like commit to a year of doing rounds. And I'm also really curious to like explore the thread more of optimism. What does it? I'm curious about everything Gideon sees around this being the year of optimism. Like, that gets me excited. And I'd also be curious about Enti. You mentioned a little bit of skepticism on how that might play out, and so I would love to like flesh out that thread more too.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'll share my views on optimism, and then Isaac, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the kind of the rigidity of it, because I think I sort of know what you're talking about. But I mean, I think that with optimism, we're on a chain that it has like a very public commitment to retroactive public goods funding, and some good process, still evolving, but pretty good process and commitment to that process for funding retroactive public goods. And I think that what we found in this last retro round was that we actually didn't even know what we were doing but we still seem to kind of have a decent impact in getting a lot of badge holders rallied around us. And I think that we could do way more with that. And I think that the just the sheer amount of money that's at stake here would dwarf anything else that we'd be getting from other places. You know, even with the sponsorships. So I think that in terms of focus, we could like one of the issues I'm having, to be honest, with the General Magic grant writing process is that it's a lot of kind of like shooting out a lot of grants to a lot of places. When actually, if we really focused on building relationships and optimism, and continue to invest in the relationship with Gitcoin, like I think those places are where we can generate a lot more funds. And so coming up with some way of like maybe reaching out to Jonah for the OP Retro PGF and saying like, is there a way to partner? Because he's a token engineering guy, and just see if there's some ideas there, and then maybe eventually use that as a way to bridge to EF. So that's my thinking.
I also want to put it out there. I think we can make a pretty big move with TQF. I think the tool itself is a lot very presentable to other communities, and like we can get it in the hands of operators. It's way simplified now, and I can see how it can continue to be tightened up in a few more ways. And some of the ideas that Octopus has about studying the network formation, like he wants to look at the time series of donations and see how he has like there's these formulas for network formation, different ways that networks formate, and Octopus wants to map some of those into how donations play out. And I think like with the software being tuned up, then we can focus on publishing paper/article, and I think we can like really utilize that in a few ways coming up early in the new year.
Yep, I agree.
Sorry, did you see Griff's message on the side?
Yep, we are loaded up. Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Amazing.
I was going to say what I was going to say. Yeah, so for example, yes, the TQF stuff is part of what I'm also saying. Like we've invested a lot on QF to not like really squeeze everything out of it. About optimism, I don't follow optimism that closely, and the very same reason is because optimism is like a governance, which is also one of my criticisms of the TC. For example, it's a governance that was pre-designed in a lot of senses. So it's very rigid. It's very sort of based on theory, if you wish. And it's not like you go to the forum and you make a proposal and people comment on it and then vote for it to be accepted. You have multiple tracks, most of which have a very strict scope, and you have to align with one of them. At least that was the last time I checked Optimism, because also Optimism works with seasons, and every single season they change stuff up. But it's overall, it's like a few tracks, very tracks. We once tried to apply to one of them, and we were just not within the scope. And for most of the scopes I've seen throughout Optimism history, it's very hard to justify OP to give up on a QF round. Giveth has gotten it, but I believe Giveth also got it because they are also the applications. It's like Optimism gets a new application, and by the nature of the application, they distribute OP, if that makes sense. But we don't own the application or anything. We are just administrating a bunch of OP to give up. And like if we were to go to Gnosis governance or Arbitrums, they are both easier, more flexible. Optimism is just not. So if we are lucky, we have something, we encounter something. If we are not, we probably won't. But I agree with the relationships thing, and I'm not now seeing the chat. I will jump off as well. So, but thank you guys. So I guess just next steps very quickly. We won't do the round in March. That's what we have for sure.
Seems like it. Also seems like we should have a message to the Gitcoin folks, and let's maybe do async coordination around that.
Okay.
Because we might be able to also get their help in recruiting somebody. Okay, I need to run. Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
See you later.
Thank you guys. Take care.